The moment an avoidant finally realizes they destroyed your heart never arrives the way people imagine. There's no dramatic shock, no sudden regret-filled confession, no emotional collapse in front of you. Instead, it happens quietly, slowly, and always far later than you expected. Most people think the realization comes during the breakup, when emotions are high and everything feels intense. But avoidants don't process loss in real time. Research in attachment theory from University of California shows that avoidant individuals have what psychologists call a deactivating strategy. Their minds are literally wired to shut down emotions as a defense mechanism, a pattern often rooted in childhood when vulnerability felt unsafe. So when you cried, when you pleaded for clarity, when you were breaking right there in front of them, they felt nothing close to what you felt. Not because they didn't care, because they couldn't feel it yet. Their emotional processing is delayed, sometimes by months, sometimes by years. It begins with something small. Their realization begins with something small, something almost insignificant. A photo they forgot to delete suddenly appears in their gallery. A song you two once shared starts playing in a grocery store. A random memory, your laugh, the way you said their name, the comfort your presence brought, slips through the cracks of their defenses. And at that moment, something shifts inside them. Not enough to break them, not yet, but enough to remind them of something they spent months trying to suppress. Research from the University of Minnesota confirms that avoidant partners process emotional loss on a delay. They feel the impact not in the moment, but when the silence grows heavy and the person they took for granted is finally out of reach. The dangerous assumption. Avoidants convince themselves they are better off alone. They tell themselves they don't need affection, don't need closeness, don't need emotional intimacy. When things start feeling too vulnerable, they detach. They distance. They rationalize. They sabotage. And because you love them consistently, patiently, fully, they never truly believe you would walk away. In their mind, you are always going to be there, waiting, forgiving, trying again. But when your absence becomes real, when the silence grows heavier than the comfort they once felt alone, their emotional paralysis slowly weakens. When relief becomes regret, the first wave hits them when their initial relief fades. After the breakup, avoidants usually feel lighter, freed, as if the emotional pressure has been lifted. They dive into distractions, work, hobbies, friends, anything that prevents them from sitting alone with themselves. But real life has a way of breaking through the walls they obsessively build. They walk into a place you visited together, and suddenly their chest tightens. They try to talk to someone new, but the emotional connection feels flat and hollow. They're reminded of the depth you brought, the emotional warmth only you offered. And that's when the cracks begin to appear. The wave of memories. Avoidants replay moments long after they happen. They remember your long messages they ignored or replied to with one word. They remember how you tried to understand them while they shut down, how you reached out while they pulled away, how your voice softened during arguments while theirs went silent. They remember the disappointment in your tone when they canceled plans again. They remember confusion in your eyes when they disconnected without explanation, leaving you wondering what you did wrong when you did nothing wrong at all. These memories don't hit all at once. They come in waves, each stronger than the last, each carrying guilt they don't know how to handle. Avoidants don't process guilt outwardly. They swallow it. They internalize it. They carry it like a weight they can't name. The true breaking point. But their true breaking point doesn't come from memories or guilt. It comes from something they never expected. Realizing you're no longer waiting. Avoidants assume people will always hold space for them. They assume that the door will stay open, that the connection will remain intact, that the person they pushed away will still be emotionally available. But when they reach out and your tone is different, when your replies are shorter, when your energy is distant, when they realize your world no longer revolves around them, something shatters inside them. They don't break because you left. They break because you healed. You transformed. You detached in the same way they once did. But for you, it was growth, not avoidance. For you, it was self-respect, not fear. The shock of your boundaries. Seeing you with boundaries shocks them. Seeing you calm, confident, emotionally grounded, and unapologetically protective of your own peace forces them to confront something they spent their entire life avoiding. the consequences of their patterns. For the first time, they see how deeply they hurt someone who only wanted to love them. They see clearly how many chances you gave them, how many times you tried to understand them, how many times you stayed when most people would have walked away. And the worst part for them is realizing they didn't lose you because the love was weak. They lost you because they couldn't handle receiving the very thing they secretly longed for. When they come back, avoidants often come back, not as healed versions of themselves, but as nostalgic, confused, regret-ridden versions trying to reconnect with the emotional safety they once pushed away. They come back not because they've changed, but because they miss the warmth you gave them. They miss the emotional stability you offered. They miss the comfort of someone who understood their silence better than anyone understood their words. But when they return, they are met with a version of you they never saw coming. A version of you who no longer romanticizes their potential. A version of you who no longer tolerates emotional inconsistency. A version of you who learned that love cannot be built alone. And that is the moment that breaks them. They expected the same open door. They expected the same softness. They expected the same heart. But now that door is closed, not with anger, not with bitterness, but with a quiet finality that hurts them more than anything you ever said. Your peace becomes their mirror. Your healing becomes their consequence. Your growth becomes a truth they can't escape, the truth you need to hear. But here's the part that matters most. Their realization is not your responsibility. Their regret is not your closure. Their awakening does not define your worth. You didn't walk away because you stopped caring. You walked away because you finally cared about yourself. You stopped trying to save someone who didn't know how to let themselves be saved. You stopped shrinking yourself to fit into the emotional gaps they refuse to fill. And choosing yourself was not just an act of self-love. It was the moment you broke the cycle they had been repeating their entire life. Your story doesn't end with their realization. Your story doesn't end where their realization begins. Their pain is not your victory. Their regret is not your healing. Their delayed understanding doesn't validate your value. You were valuable even when they couldn't see it. And now you stand stronger, clearer, more whole than you were before. Because you learned one of the hardest lessons. You can't love someone into healing, and you can't carry both hearts in a relationship. You deserve someone who shows up, someone who communicates, someone who leans in instead of pulling away, someone who doesn't need to lose you to understand your worth, your liberation. The avoidance realization may be one of the most painful moments of their life, but for you, it marks the beginning of your freedom. You survived what was meant to break you. You grew in the places they stayed stuck. You're no longer waiting for them to understand what they lost, because now you understand what you gained, your clarity, your peace, your strength. And that is the real ending to this story. Not their regret, but your evolution. Not their breaking point, but your breakthrough. Not their loss, but your liberation. You're not waiting anymore. You're not hoping anymore. You're not giving pieces of yourself to someone who doesn't know how to hold them carefully. You're whole, you're healing, and you're walking toward a future where your love is matched, not wasted. The moment an avoidant realizes they destroyed your heart is painful for them, but it's liberating for you. It's confirmation that you weren't crazy for feeling hurt. You weren't overreacting when you said you felt unseen. You weren't asking for too much when you wanted consistency and emotional intimacy. Everything you felt was valid, and now you get to move forward with that knowledge, with those standards, with those boundaries firmly in place. The avoidance journey is theirs to walk. Your journey is yours. That's the real ending to the story. Not their realization, but yours. Not their breaking point, but your breakthrough. Not their regret, but your freedom.